It was a quiet evening and I found myself sitting in the backyard. The air was cool and I could hear the sound of the water bubbling in the hot tub nearby. Normally the house would be full of noise, especially when my stepmom threw her parties, but tonight it was just me. I had a glass of wine in my hand that I secretly took from the fridge, and I was lost in my own thoughts as I sat there. I heard the sliding door open. My stepmom, slightly tipsy, walked out with a couple of her friends following behind. They were laughing softly, their drinks in hand, and it didn't take long for them to notice me sitting by myself. "Hey, what are you doing all alone out here?" my stepmom asked, a playful smile on her lips. I shrugged, not really knowing what to say. I wasn't expecting company, especially not hers. She and her friends were wearing bikinis under their robes, clearly ready to get into the hot tub. "You should join us," one of her friends suggested, her voice light and teasing. I looked away, unsure. It felt strange, but before I could say anything, my stepmom walked over and took the wine glass from my hand, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Come on, don't be shy," she said, pulling me up from my seat. "It'll be fun, the water's perfect tonight." I hesitated for a moment, but something about the way they were all looking at me made it hard to say no. My stepmom's friends giggled as I finally gave in and stepped towards the hot tub. They all slipped out of their robes and climbed into the warm water, their laughter filling the night air. I stood by the edge for a second, feeling a little out of place, but my stepmom gave me a knowing look, patting the spot beside her, and I couldn't help but join them. The hot water felt good against my skin, easing the tension. I didn't realize I sat there quietly at first, not sure what to expect. "Relax," one of her friends said, her voice soothing as she leaned back in the water. "We're all here to have a good time." My stepmom handed me another glass of wine, her fingers brushing against mine for just a second longer than necessary. I wasn't sure if it was the warmth of the water or the alcohol kicking in, but I started to feel more comfortable. The conversation flowed easily, mostly about small talk, but there was an underlying tension that I couldn't ignore. At some point, my stepmom moved closer to me, her shoulder gently touching mine as she spoke. Her friends were watching us, their smiles almost daring me to make a move, but I stayed still, unsure of where this was going. As the minutes passed, the atmosphere shifted. My stepmom's hand casually rested on my arm, her touch lingering longer than it should have. I tried to play it cool, but I could feel my heart racing. She leaned in, her breath warm against my ear as she whispered something that made my skin tingle. Her friends, meanwhile, were playfully splashing around, but I could tell they were watching. One of them moved closer, her eyes locking with mine for a brief moment before she smiled, her lips curving in a way that sent a shiver down my spine. Before I knew it, I was surrounded. The warmth of the water, the wine, and their cielo class made everything feel hazy. My stepmom leaned in even more, her lips brushing against my cheek, teasing. Her friends giggled softly, and I could feel the tension building with every passing second. It was like the world outside didn't exist anymore. The only thing that mattered was the heat, the closeness, and the unspoken tension hanging in the air. My stepmom's hand slid down my arm, and I could tell she wasn't just being playful anymore. Her friends seemed to be in on it too, their laughter soft, their gazes lingering a little too long. I could hardly think as her whisper hung in the air, sending shivers down my spine. Her words were like a promise, one that left me breathless. The water swirled around us, warm and inviting, but it was nothing compared to the heat building between all of us. My stepmom's lips were on my neck again, soft and teasing as her fingers traced lazy patterns across my chest. Her friends were still close, their hands exploring, their lips brushing my skin now and then, each touch more deliberate, more intense than before. I couldn't help but feel completely surrounded. Everywhere I turned there was a soft touch, a warm body pressing closer. like they were pulling me deeper into this moment that felt like it might never end. One of her friends leaned in her hand, sliding up my chest as she kissed me. Again her lips gentle but firm it was. Almost too much the way their touches overlapped, the way they seemed to know exactly how to make me lose control. My head spun as I kissed her back, my hands finding their way to her waist without even thinking. Meanwhile my stepmom's lips moved down my neck, her breath hot against my skin as she whispered things that made my heart race. "You've been waiting for this, haven't you?" she murmured, her words sending a jolt through me. She was so close, her body pressed up against mine in a way that made it impossible to think straight. Before I knew it, her other friend was there too, her fingers tracing down my arm, her lips brushing against my jaw. "You deserve this," she said softly, her eyes meeting mine with a look that was both playful and intense. I could feel her breath on my face as she leaned in, kissing me slowly, her hands gently tugging me closer. My stepmom pulled back just enough to look at me, her eyes dark and full of something I couldn't quite name. But I knew I felt it too. She smiled, a slow teasing smile that made my stomach flip. "We're just getting started," she whispered. Her friends giggled softly, their hands still tracing slow, deliberate patterns on my skin. I wasn't sure how much more of this I could take. The way they all seemed to know exactly what to do, the way they moved so smoothly together, as if this had all been planted out beforehand. It was almost overwhelming, but I didn't want it to stop. I didn't want this moment to end. One of her friends, the one who had been closest to me, moved in again, her lips grazing mine in a kiss that felt softer, more intimate. Her fingers brushed my cheek as she pulled me closer, her body pressing up against mine under the water. I could feel her heartbeat against my chest, fast and steady, matching the rhythm of my own. My stepmom's other friend was there next, her hands slipping around my waist as she leaned in, her lips ghosting over mine for just a moment before pulling back, her eyes dancing with mischief. My stepmom watched, her smile widening as her friends teased me. She leaned in again, her lips so close to mine that I could feel her breath on my face. "Are you enjoying this?" she asked, her voice low and sultry. I couldn't speak, couldn't find the words to answer her. All I could do was nod, my heart racing as her lips finally met mine again in a slow, lingering kiss. Her hand was on my thigh, and I felt like she is trying to remove my clothes and hold something in her hands. I allowed her by helping her get me naked, and she held my strong hard rod. Then I took the next step. My hands were on my stepmom's body. I removed her swimsuit, and her friend followed by removing her swimsuit, and now we were all naked. I loved looks for their hot bodies. I started sucking on my stepmom, and after that I did the same to her friend. Both were loving the experience. We were all hot in this hot tub, doing everything we can. I stood up, and both of them took my hot dog in their mouths. That was the best thing ever happened to me. I couldn't control myself, and I released my sauce on both of them, and then I rested in the same hot tub. As the night went on, everything started to calm down. The hot tub still bubbled, but the tension from earlier had faded. My stepmom moved back a little, her hand still gently touching me, but now there was a different look in her eyes, softer, more relaxed. Her friends were quiet now, just smiling as they sat there and enjoying the warm water. It felt like the rush of excitement had passed, and we were all just soaking in the moment. After a while, my stepmom sighed, giving me a soft smile. "That was fun," she said quietly, her voice warm but calm. "Now we'll have to do this again sometime." Her friends nodded in agreement, their playful smiles still there, but everything felt a little more peaceful. They slowly got out of the hot tub, wrapping themselves in towels and giggling quietly as they headed back inside. My stepmom was the last to leave, giving me one last look over her shoulder, her eyes twinkling. "Good night," she said softly, before disappearing inside with her. Friends, I stayed in the hot tub a little longer, letting the warm water soothe me. My heart was still racing, but I knew everything had come to a close. The night had been unexpected, intense, and unforgettable, but now it was quiet again. Just me and the stillness of the backyard. As I leaned back and closed my eyes, I couldn't help but smile to myself, knowing that things would never be quite the same after tonight.